A few things I like to point out to people so they know what adaptogens are. First of all, it is an evidence-based word. So unlike a word like superfood, which is a marketing word that means everything and nothing, adaptogen is actually a scientific word to explain the effects. So that's kind of one thing. Secondly, is that there are these three rules that were set by the founders of Adaptogen about 7 years ago. And these rules say that every adaptogen needs to be safe, it needs to be non-specific, so it impacts multiple body systems, and it needs to restore balance. So there are clear guidelines on what can be an adaptogen. Today, we have a few dozen adaptogens that we know of. Could there be more? Yes, but needs to be enough Western research to back them up to justify that they are what they are. And then third, even though it is evidence-based and it has these strict scientific guardrails, all of these adaptogens today have been used for hundreds, if not thousands of years for health around the world. And they're literally the best number one, number two herb or mushroom from each corner of the world. So by consuming adaptogen, you're consuming the sacred food of each region of the world. And it often ends up being also the sacred food of each kind of big family.
Welcome on the show, my first guest. Tero Isokauppila is the founder and CEO of Four Sigmatic, a functional foods company that wants to make the world's most studied and nutrition-dense foods more delicious and easier to consume to bring health upgrades into America's daily routine. Tero's roots are in Finland, where he grew up growing and foraging natural foods on his 13th generation family farm. He later earned a degree in chemistry, business, and a certificate in plant-based nutrition at Cornell University. In 2012, Tero founded Four Sigmatic with the dream of bringing a little everyday magic to the lives of all. Also, I welcome on Danielle Broida. She is a key player in the worldwide mushroom movement. As a registered herbalist of the American Herbalist Guild, certified holistic nutritionist, and the head of education for Four Sigmatic, Danielle is teaching the world about the importance of life on functional mushrooms. In this episode, we talk about their newest book that they have co-authored together called Healing Adaptogens, the definitive guide to using super herbs and mushrooms for your body's restoration, defense, and performance. Okay, I have the pleasure of welcoming on Tero and Danielle from Four Sigmatic and also the experts in adaptogens and functional mushrooms. I have given an introduction to you before in the episode. Of course, we'll go more into your story, but I just want to tell you what an honor to have you both here. Double the goodness. I'm obsessed, as I was telling you before we press record, that I'm an avid user of or avid buyer of Four Sigmatic. I have the coffee every single morning, which I'll show. Every single morning, that's my go-to coffee. Of course, I add my functional mushrooms and adaptogens, which this is the focus blend. And I actually, every single podcast recording, this is a no matter what. And I consume cacao every morning. I'm obsessed with the whole thing, right? So I'm just so honored to have you both on. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having us. We're honored to be with you today.
Yeah, thanks for having us both.
Of course. Well, so of course, like I said, I gave an introduction, but I would love to hear, just to kind of crystallize this episode, just a little background of your knowledge in adaptogens and also just the, space of holistic healing and functional mushrooms. Maybe Tero, if you want to start giving a little background of your expertise.
Yeah, I grew up on a family farm in Finland that we've had for at least 13 generations. I grew up showering in spring water, eating and wild food and whatnot. My dad is an agronomist. My mom taught physiology and anatomy. And then besides that, I studied first chemistry and then nutrition and worked with professional athletes in nutrition for 20 years. And with adaptogens for about 20 years. And then I started Four Sigmatic. So I'm the founder and CEO of Four Sigmatic, and I started that a little over 10 years ago. So that's the brief version of my background.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, just hearing your background alone, that your generation, you're the 14th generation, correct?
Well, I'm the 13th. My children are the 14th that we know of. So my parents are the 12th. Me and my brother are the 13th. And then our kids who are now, they're little toddlers, but they're learning about farming already.
That's so remarkable. I love it. I love it. So, Danielle, and what's a little bit of your background and expertise?
Yeah, I'm a registered herbalist by trade. So after finishing my undergrad, I moved to Asia, which was really where my journey began with herbal medicine, and lived with hill tribe villagers, and actually took groups out into the backcountry. So we would backpack into different hill tribe villages, and it was very remote where we'd forage for food and medicine. And I just became fascinated by herbal medicine and forest medicine, and a lot of mushrooms used in Asian culture. And after about 3 years living and working out there, I moved back to the States to formalize my education. I went to the Colorado School of Clinical Herbalism, where I now teach mycology and am very involved still in the school. And I had no idea what type of clients would come to me after finishing my grad program. And I opened a private practice, and this is a very common theme with holistic practitioners of any sorts, but most of the people coming to me basically said, I've tried everything and you're my last resort. And so it brought a lot of chronic illness and autoimmunity and ailments that the Western world didn't have a name or a diagnosis for. And I was formulating individual medicine for each client, each client's body, which we can get into later, bioindividuality. But I really started focusing on functional mushroom-based treatment. And it was one of the safest and most effective leading species that I could put in my formulas for this huge range of immune deficiency or overstimulated immune bodies. And just fell in love. I was like, why aren't functional mushrooms being used more? Where are they in the West? And I found Four Sigmatic during my private practice, looking for an easier way for my clients to ingest these medicines in the traditional way. So as an herbalist, really important to carry on the tradition and offer these ingredients in the way that they've been used for thousands of years. And so eventually, lots of synchronicities, but I joined forces with Tero almost 5 years ago, and have worn many hats and been primarily doing education with Four Sigmatic for the last several years.
So remarkable. Yeah, there is so much knowledge that you two individually share. It's mind-blowing. And obviously, I want to talk heavily about your newest book, Healing Adaptogens, the definitive guide using super herbs, mushrooms for your body's restoration, defense, and performance. This book, as I was mentioning, when I was diving into it, my mind was blown. And also it was pretty just eye-opening how powerful these adaptogens are. And we might as well really just start talking about this. So adaptogens, I know a lot of people have probably heard the word about now. And so for anybody listening, they maybe have heard the word, but they don't know exactly what an adaptogen is. So can you define this? And also, what are the properties of adaptogens and the science behind them?
Yeah, I'll take the first part, and maybe Danielle can comment on the science and properties. So adaptogens are substances that help you adapt to stress. So that's very brief version of a lot of things. A few things I like to point out to people so they know what adaptogens are. First of all, it is an evidence-based word. So unlike a word like superfood, which is a marketing word that means everything and nothing, adaptogen is actually a scientific word to explain the effects. So that's kind of one thing. Secondly is that there are these 3 rules that were set by the founders of Adaptogen about 7 years ago. And these rules say that every adaptogen needs to be safe, it needs to be non-specific, so it impacts multiple body systems, and it needs to restore balance. So there are clear guidelines on what can be an adaptogen. Today we have a few dozen adaptogens that we know of. Could there be more? Yes, but needs to be enough Western research to back them up to justify that they are what they are. And then third, even though it is evidence-based and it has these strict scientific guardrails, all of these adaptogens today have been used for hundreds, if not thousands of years for health around the world. And they're literally the best number one, number two herb or mushroom from each corner of the world. So by consuming adaptogen, you're consuming the sacred food of each region of the world. And it often ends up being also the sacred food of each kind of big family. So this family of, let's say, peas and legumes, there's a top one there, or one of these tree mushrooms, there's one there. But anyway, that's kind of what you should know. It's scientific. There are these three requirements, and they're also ancient sacred foods of each corner of the world. But maybe Danielle can comment on some of the common properties that are found across adaptogens.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a great intro. And just to further that, I think a lot of what confuses people around adaptogens is their activity of being non-specific, especially in the Western world. We're so used to taking a medicine, whether it's pharmaceutical or natural, for a direct reason. So I have a headache, I take a NSAID, an ibuprofen, or perhaps an herbal medicine for a headache, maybe feverfew or something. That's a specific kind of pill for an ill approach. Adaptogens don't work in that way, which is part of the confusion, but also part of where their magic comes from. And so to break this down a little bit, they are full synergistic species, right? So we're talking about a whole mushroom fruiting body or a whole fruit or a root. And so there's many, many compounds working together synergistically. So we're not just targeting a specific action in the body. What is so unique about these adaptogens is they often have compounds that are working in opposition to each other. So a brief example I'll share that might be more obvious to some of us is cacao. We talk about cacao as an adaptogen in the book. And some people take cacao. You mentioned, Erica, you take it in the morning. Maybe you feel a little stimulated, a little energized from cacao. That's because it has this compound called theobromine, which is kind of like a sister molecule to caffeine. It's not actually caffeine, but it can give this kind of uplifting, stimulating effect. On the other hand, cacao also is one of our richest natural sources of magnesium, which is not only the number one nutrient deficiency in the American population, it's our cellular relaxer. So critical. When I think about how stressed we are globally and how deficient we are in magnesium, like, of course, our bodies are missing the mineral it needs to really relax. So both of these are present within the same bean, right? Along with many, many other phytocompounds. And so depending on the body that ingests that cacao bean, that adaptogen, you might either feel a little bit of a lift, a little more stimulated, getting in that cacao flow, or perhaps you feel a little more relaxed. Your nervous system begins to relax. It might prepare you for a deep night of rest, right? And so each adaptogen has this non-specific activity, and they're really working with our bodies. So depending on the state of your system, how stressed you are, how well your liver is functioning, maybe perhaps how you slept last night, that adaptogen is going to have a different effect in your body than anyone else that takes the same medicine.
It's so fascinating. I thought that was the most interesting thing about these adaptogens, and cacao was the best example, especially from my experience, because I drink it in the morning and I do feel I have more energy. I feel just that feel good feeling. Like I feel just like I just drank a cup of love. That's how I feel after I drink it. So it's very interesting because I know some people consume it in the evening. And so I was always like, which one do I do? But you explained it so perfectly. And that's what I think is so fascinating about these adaptogens is they have like a yin and a yang of these properties that benefit in different ways. So in your book, you go into very much detail of these. Actually, you have 21 adaptogens specifically that you cover in this book, even though, as you mentioned, there's more, but these are probably the core, most significant ones that you talk about. And so one thing I love about this book is you break it up into categories. You have the restoration, you have the defense, and the perform. And there's certain either mushrooms or adaptogens that help those, but they also contribute in other areas. So you list the uses and then also what is commonly, like when it's commonly taken and whatnot. So I'd love to break this down, but before we go into that, one of my curious questions is, are adaptogens a substitute for medication? Would you say, like, if somebody were, I'll just give an example, treating cancer, or let's say a thyroid disease. I mean, you could list so many different problems that a medication is required. Is this a substitute, or is it possibly an additive to help the process with the medication?
Yeah, that's a great question. And because, we're authors and educators, me and Danielle, um, we can say certain things, but at the same time, we work for a company, Four Sigmatic, which is regulated by FDA. So we cannot point out that any food or supplement can cure or prevent a disease. So to answer briefly, no, they will not cure or prevent a disease. Have they been used indigenously for that purpose? Yes, and there's plenty of evidence of that. Has there been studies? Yes, and this is something we can say, and we can point out to how either these adaptogens, such as turkey tail mushroom, there's an isolated compound either out of turkey tail mushroom that is used as a cancer, breast cancer drug in Japan. There's another one adaptogen called cordyceps, which has an isolated compound used in the only of form of MS, which is an autoimmune disorder, MS disease drug. So these exist either in isolated compounds as part of FDA-approved pharmaceuticals, and in their whole food form. Nothing from blueberries to eggs officially does not prevent or cure disease. And that's, just something, a stance we have to unfortunately take. But in the book, we quote a lot of research papers. We went through over 1,000 research papers on different things that these are studied for. We took the best studies, the gold standard, double-blind, placebo, controlled studies, ideally on humans whenever possible, and quoted them on the book to just give people a little bit of resources on how to learn more. But yeah, I can tell a personal example, and I don't know if Danielle has anything to add, but like my father went through conventional cancer therapy, and I hear this story a lot. And like a few years ago, he was diagnosed with multiple forms of cancer. Today, he's completely cancer free.
Wow.
So sometimes we think of binary ways where you have to either choose the natural way or only the natural way, or if you choose the Western isolated medical way, then you cannot do anything natural. And maybe in some cases, it's better to have a little bit of a less of a black and white approach. But I don't know if Danielle, you had anything to add to that.
Yeah, I'll just mention that Tero and I both agree you should always, always add before subtracting anything. And this is the case with adaptogens too. They're not meant to replace a medication, but they're also not meant to replace any other habits to a healthy, holistic lifestyle. So we wouldn't want you to say, oh, yeah, you can take ashwagandha and don't worry about eating healthy food or exercising or drinking clean water. So they should be an addition, and they can be really strong, especially some of the more kind of stimulating, pushy adaptogens. So they all fit within this umbrella category. They have these three commonalities, as Tero mentioned, but they're each individual species. Mm-hmm. Right? This is important. Like all three of us are consuming probably mushrooms already this morning. We have this similarity, but we all offer a unique thing into the world. Same with the adaptogens. And so they exist on this spectrum, and some are much more gentle, food-like, things like cacao, reishi mushroom. Others are a little more pushy, like our ginseng, true ginseng. We talk a lot about the misnomers of ginseng throughout the book. And so they shouldn't be used to replace any other healthy habit in your life. But there's so many stories where, especially in my private practice, once you start using an adaptogen and adding and bringing it on board, your body doesn't, not always, but oftentimes your body doesn't crave some of the unhealthy practices that you might have been used to. I have a really funny client story where I put him on a formula. It was high in turmeric and black pepper and some other functional mushrooms. And he, after a couple of weeks, he was like, I went to the movies and I didn't want popcorn and a soda for the first time. Like, what's in this formula? And I was like, it has nothing to do with it. That's mindset, and your body is starting to be fed with the nutrients it might have been depleted in for, many years, and you start feeling more vital and making better choices for yourself. So I will say that I see that pattern, but always adding and continuing to focus on other parts of a holistic life and healthy protocol as well.
Absolutely.
And I might want to add there is just not with adaptogens, but nutrition in general, the body is quite complex. It's a real symphony. And actually, it's a combination of probably 11 symphonies. So we have 11 main systems in our body: digestive system, circulatory system, endocrine system, reproductive system, so on and so forth. And each one of these symphonies and systems is quite complex. And there is a positive circle and a vicious cycle where, for example, if you sleep poorly, you probably wake up tired, craving coffee and sugar. If you have coffee and sugar, you probably are depleting your adrenals, but also at night, you have maybe elevated levels of caffeine in your blood, and then therefore you don't sleep so well. Yeah, and then next day you're even more tired. Also works the other way around, is that if you can improve a little bit of 2% of something like deep sleep quality, you will then maybe have energy next day to go to the gym. By going to the gym, you'll have positive health benefits. So as like one example of how adaptogens work, to build off of the cacao we mentioned, and you said you feel like a cup of love. And this is actually like scientifically valid. So in our brain, we have this alkaloid called PEA that, among many other things, is noticed when you fall in love, you have high levels of release of PEA. Unfortunately, it has a really short half-life. What we also know is that when you consume cacao, this actually boosts and stimulates the release of PEA in your brain. So literally, how your brain behaves when you're in love is similar to how it behaves when you drink cacao. And how that then, if you that mood, that runner's high or feeling in love mood in your brain will make you happier. Maybe you'll have another positive interaction with someone else, and then that compounds, and that positive cycle then leads you to sleep better, exercise better, and then the positive effects compound. So I think generally it's good to know that small things can have compounding effects over time.
Absolutely. So the first time I heard about turkey tail and its properties in helping cancer and also immunity is when my dog actually got cancer. And when I was digging around doing my research, that was one of the things is giving functional mushrooms, and turkey tail was the one main one that was required or recommended. And so I was giving him that in conjunction with the chemo, but that was the first time I learned about it. And then of course, so it's very interesting that these mushrooms and adaptogens are actually super beneficial, not only to humans, but also our pets. So pet lovers out there, it's something to also inform yourself with or dig deeper of what you could use for your pet. So I think that's really phenomenal about these adaptogens. So since we're talking about mushrooms a little bit, I'm just curious. So I know in your book you explain that there's actually fungi in itself is one ecosystem, as in, plants and the human life and everything. So how does fungi play in our lives? Like, why is it so important for people to understand? I know there was a documentary on fungi actually recently. I forgot what it was called, but it was very, very interesting of this whole ecosystem and world and how important it is actually to us as humans. So what could you say about that?
So much. I'll kick it off really broadly and then I'll pass it to Tero. This is like our world, and I get so excited talking about this. But as you mentioned, the movie is Fantastic Fungi. Really, really phenomenal option. Is a few years old now. But to just kind of set the stage, as you mentioned, fungi are their own biological kingdom. So they used to be thought of as a lower form of plant, and then scientists came together and really only about 50 years ago and realized, hey, they're nothing like plants. We as humans are actually closer related to them than we are to plants. We share about 50% of our DNA with them. But it's a massive kingdom, and within that, there's a subsect of species that fruit mushrooms. So when we talk about mushrooms. Not all fungi are mushrooms, but all mushrooms are part of this fungi kingdom. And mushrooms are and the fungi are so prevalent in so many areas in our life, whether we are privy to that or not. They are within our gut. They are underneath our feet. Every step we take on the planet, we're stepping on about 300 miles of mycelial biomass, this interconnected, it's almost, you can think of it like the root-like structure of where mushrooms fruit from. But this is a living, breathing, I think of it as a like cardiovascular and nervous system of our planet, connecting over 90% of plants on Earth. So as an herbalist, we give so much praise to our plant life, but it's really the fungi that are integral to providing the nutrients that we then use our plants for. And when in our world, when we talk about functional mushrooms, these are different than culinary mushrooms, psychedelic mushrooms, poisonous mushrooms, right? There's all these different areas that people typically think of. This functional denotes that there are about 600 or 700 species that have been used medicinally for their benefits to the human body in cultures all across the world. In the book, and often people think about traditional Chinese medicine, which they were very good at recording the use of these mushrooms, but there are all different indigenous cultures across the planet that relied and used these functional mushrooms for their health benefits. And I'm like, how deep do we go there? Even within that, we just keep zooming in. There's 5 that we really call out in the book, which we can mention that are particularly beneficial for a lot of what we are looking for help for today. Things like brain and cognitive health, long-term immune system benefits, gut health, physical energy and endurance. So we really call out those and focus on those both within the book and with Four Sigmatic. But Tero, I'll pass it off to you. Just kind of like general fun, why fungi are so relevant in our worlds and where they are.
Yeah, in the highest possible level, mushrooms are part of fungi. Fungi are the kingdom. Mushrooms are the fruit body, kind of like Danielle alluded to. Fungi are one of the 5 or 6 kingdoms in biology, so they're not a subgroup of plants. And why are they relevant to humans more than maybe other things is that we animals share common ancestors with fungi. We were part of the same super kingdom long time before. So we share up to 50% of our DNA with fungi, and there's a lot of other similarities, such as they need to eat food, they can use photosynthesis, they have to breathe oxygen like animals. That means that on our skin and our gut, we have fungi, you want it or not. So if you're listening to this and it's like, I hate mushrooms and I will never eat mushrooms, sorry to break it to you, but you're going to have fungi in your body no matter what, on your skin and gut. Wherever you find bacteria, if you've heard of microbiome, there's actually also mycobiome. So you'll have them in your body. And then secondly, more foods than you realize contain fungi, be it beer, wine, bread, cheese, all fermented foods. Cacao as well, sauerkraut, kimchi, even like dried meats like jerkies. So you will consume them, and some of them are good, some of them are bad, similar to plants. Like not every plant is good. If you're like, hey, I eat plant-based, well, tons of plants will kill you. So so same with fungi. And if you don't consume these good fungi, you have a risk of bad fungi taking over. Examples of that would be like candida. So yeah, fungal infections. So by consuming good fungi, you actually contain these mushrooms that are anti-mushrooms or antifungal, and that has a huge impact on your health. So maybe what I would like to say is that it is a kingdom, it's super diverse. You will use it, you want it or not, and the quality of fungi you consume will have a huge impact on your gut health, brain, immunity, whatnot.
Amazing. And also, one thing that is talked about with adaptogens is the harsh environment they are brought up in. So how does this contribute to us consuming? And is there some properties that because it's formed in this harsh environment, is that something that kind of plays a part in us consuming them as well? If that's asked correctly, I'm not even sure.
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is so important, right? There's a huge difference between getting your ingredients in the environment that they evolve to grow in versus growing them in a controlled lab setting. And so relevant with with mushrooms. I'll mention two things here. The first is it's called xenohormesis. So as you're talking about, when a mushroom or when a plant is growing out in nature, it's exposed to, especially with our adaptogens, many stressors, be it variations in temperature throughout the day, harsh soil conditions, winds. I'm thinking last summer, Tero and I were in Iceland searching for rhodiola, which is this amazing adaptogen. And not only, we have like black sand beaches and glaciers and volcanoes erupting. Like, this is a super, super harsh environment. And I'm like, where is it? And it wasn't until we were really deep on a hike and there was this big rocky cliffside, and that was where the rhodiola was growing. And in response to all of these stressors, the planter fungi develops compounds. A lot of these are polyphenols, but they are compounds that help them to deal with the stressors in their environment, right? And often, rhodiola is this like sweet little succulent, and yet it's so resilient. From a more kind of herbal energetic perspective, I call this the doctrine of signatures. So how something is growing in nature, how it looks, gives us information for how it might be beneficial to our body. The common example is a walnut being good for the brain. So really, really critical when we're getting species grown in their natural environment. When they're exposed to stressors, they're developing all these compounds, which are often the phytocompounds that are beneficial for our bodies and help us to adapt to the stressors in our lives.
Amazing. And that's why I think it's so important to know where your source, where you're getting from. Obviously, your products I stand behind for not only your knowledge, but also just, of course, it's organic. You could tell the love that's put into these products, that they're sourced from a good place and it's all reputable and everything. But I know that's one thing, is like there's so many products out there now, especially that have adaptogens and these functional mushrooms. But how does one know that they're getting a reputable source? Like, is there a true tell way to make sure that you're not buying just something that possibly like buys it from a lab, if that's possible?
Yeah, that's a real concern. There was a recent study published in Science, which is one of the better scientific journals in the world, about a USB study that looked at reishi supplement. Reishi is like the queen of mushrooms and one of these best studied adaptogens. And he found that 74% of the reishi supplements sold in the US don't contain any reishi mushroom, which is pretty mind-blowing,
So
right?
horrible.
And this is not an only example. There's quite a few of them. So in the book, we try to give you these guidelines, because we could say buy brand A, don't buy brand B, but things change. So it's better to teach someone to fish than give them a fish. So we try to give these guidelines and tips. I think Danielle, as an herbalist, can comment on a couple of those things that people can watch out for, but you need to learn the system. And I think this is a good rule for anything in life, is that instead of saying, let's say investing, like buy Apple, is like learning why to buy something or not, or, diets, like, don't eat legumes or avoid lectins. Like, why would you avoid lectins? And learning that mindset will help you navigate things better going forward. But I think, Danielle, if you want to share a couple things that consumers can watch out for when they go to the store and look for herbs or mushrooms.
Yeah, three things I'll mention with mushrooms specifically, and then a few other that should be top of mind when you're buying any herbs, including adaptogens. So with our functional mushrooms, the three most important things to make sure you're actually getting the species that's been used for thousands of years, that the research is looking at, is that you're getting a real mushroom. This sounds really silly, but you have to be using the full fruiting body. So there's a lot of marketing riffraff around like mycelium, primordium, mycelium and fruiting body. They're all marketing ways to avoid the fact that they're not using the full fruiting body or just part of it. So fruiting body, real mushroom, number one. Number two is, as Tero mentioned, these mushrooms can't photosynthesize, right? They need to get their nutrients from the substrate. It's called the medium in which they're growing from. And this is critical to ensuring that the mushroom contains the compounds that we want it to, that we're using it for. And so the majority of our functional mushrooms grow on trees. So different than a lot of culinary poisonous psychedelic species that grow from the earth, these mushrooms grow from trees. And chaga is a great example. Chaga primarily grows on birch trees. We at Four Sigmatic, we go and wild harvest our chaga from the largest birch forest in the world, the taiga forest in Siberia. But one of the antioxidants we study in chaga, betalainic acid, is coming from betalain found in the bark of that birch tree, right? So if we're not growing or we're not sourcing our mushrooms from wood, they're not going to contain those final compounds that we know and love them for. And I'm making a point of this because there's so many mushroom products out on the market that are growing on cheap substrates, different grains, things like rice and oat and wheat. And not only is this dangerous because you're not getting the compounds that are found in the trees and that we want to use the mushrooms for, but oftentimes there can be up to 90% of that grain substrate left in the final product. And in my practice, I found this out the hard way. I was working with a lot of celiac clients, and of course, they're avoiding all wheat and gluten, and a lot of these mushrooms were being grown on wheat berries, and they were just getting a little bit of mycelium, so a little bit of that root system, and up to 90% wheat. And they're like, Danielle, you're suggesting these, this reishi supplement, and I'm feeling worse. What's going on? And so it really, you have to be so careful when sourcing that it doesn't say other ingredients and then has a grain listed. And then third thing with mushrooms. Oh yeah, go for it.
No, it's so great. Well, I was just going to say in your book that what I loved about that is you did have a section of like how to find it, how to find the right source. So I think that was really great. So if you want to add to the third important.
Sure. Thanks. So glad this is standing out in the book. Yeah, we're having it from both angles. But so we get that real mushroom, the fruiting body, it's grown on wood. And then the third thing to ensure you're getting benefits from your mushrooms is that they've been extracted. So we need to have this word extract. If anyone's seen a chaga or reishi mushroom, yeah, they're really hard. They grow on trees. They're often conky and they're inedible in the form that they're growing in nature. And so they have to be exposed to either high heat or tinctured through an ethanol process in order to break open this really tough exterior cell wall called chitin in order for our bodies to utilize all of these amazing compounds. So those are really the big three, so necessary. And then beyond that, just in the world of herbs and adaptogens, there's a couple additional things to look for. We put the Latin name for every species in the book, which might seem a little nerdy, but there's all different common names that people use to talk about the same species. And I see this in the marketplace. People are like, "Ooh, what is this cool?" They're using like a Spanish name for a very common plant, or a lot of times it says it's chaga. Tero and I see this all the time, and it's actually a totally different Latin name. So you actually need to make sure that you're getting what you're buying, and the Latin name is a way to check that. The second part is we call this the power hub in the book, but the medicinal part of a plant ranges, right? So for ashwagandha, we use the root, or turmeric, we use the root. Ashwagandha is in the tomato family, right? It's a nightshade. We don't use the berry, right? Even though it produces these fruits, that's not where the medicine lies. Tulsi and gotu kola, we use the leaf, right? That's the adaptogenic portion. So actually making sure that you're getting the part of the plant that contains the medicinal compounds is really, really necessary. The bioavailability extraction piece is huge. Dosing, right? How to make sure you're getting what you want and it's actually going to work in your body. I was at a natural food event the other day and there was 2 milligrams of ashwagandha in a product being sold. It's like you need minimum 250, 300 milligrams.
How crazy.
As a low dose, right?
So that's why this book everybody should grab, because everything you just walked us through is informing yourself. Like with anything, as Tero was saying, like we need to at least inform ourselves, equip ourselves with the knowledge so that we could carry that forward and make wise choices in the products we buy or what we consume. So let's switch to the goodness. This is really what the nitty gritty of this episode is, the benefits and really some of the things that we should go towards, as far as I know you broke it up into sections: the defend, the restore, and the perform. And in those categories, there's also multiple categories such as skin and immunity and sleep and restore and all these things. So if we could possibly pull out maybe one that you would recommend for each category and just a little synopsis of it and the benefits, would that be possible?
Yeah, and we can tag team. We can both say one really quickly.
Yeah.
So Danielle, do you want to start with take one for immunity, and I can do one for skin, for example?
Sure. When it comes to immunity, I'll always say reishi to start with. Not only is she the queen of mushrooms, she's the most researched of all of our functional mushrooms, has the most identified compounds, and uh, with all of the 5 functional mushrooms we mentioned, they are called immunomodulators. And this is the way that they're acting within our gut, within our immune system. And essentially, what this means is they're not directly stimulating or directly depressive or down regulating. They have the ability to do both, which is why they're safe and effective for people that are vulnerable, maybe have an underactive immune system, as well as people that might be experiencing an autoimmune condition with that overactive immune activity. So it's like kind of like cruise control for the immune system. And reishi is very safe, very gentle. We put reishi in the restore category in the book. So it's a really, regardless of the state of your health, it's a really wonderful place to begin. Working on so many levels that people might not even realize are related to the symptoms they're experiencing, right? We have this immune, gut, and stress kind of trifecta with reishi, which is so powerful. I find that regardless of what people are dealing with, when they start taking reishi for even a few weeks, a lot of symptoms begin to go away, and we get a clearer picture of what remains and what's left to deal with in their health picture.
Amazing. Actually, let me interrupt asking this particular thing is it's not just taking this for, let's say, 30 days. It's really like taking it on a continuous basis to reap the benefits. Am I correct?
Yeah, so adaptogens should be used long term. You can't just take reishi once and be like, "Cool, I'm good." That said, there are others that you can feel in a more short term basis. Cordyceps is a great example of that. You can take cordyceps once and within usually 20, 30 minutes, feel something from it, usually a little bit of a lift. But always taking at least for a couple weeks is my recommendation. And then these are strong and powerful, and your bodies will begin to adapt when you're using them. So I recommend, if you're using reishi, for example, for a couple weeks or a couple months, take a break. Your body probably, if you're taking all of those things that we mentioned and you're checking your form and your dose and the bioavailability, it'll be working and moving within your body. So at that point, you might need something different. It's like, wow, I actually feel, my stress has been supported. I feel really balanced. Perhaps I need, I want to start focusing on, I don't know, my gut health directly a little more. You might switch and use something else. So nothing wrong with taking them consistently for more than a couple months. It's actually highly recommended, but always checking in with your body and knowing that these are working. Your body's shifting and evolving as you use them. So perhaps looking to a different adaptogen or a different herb, taking a break to see where your body and check in of where it's at, and then going forward with using something new.
Perfect. Okay. And then you were saying
just to build off of that a little bit. So even though you can absolutely rotate these, you can also take them in smaller dosages. So you can have a build-up period where you take a high amount of, let's say, reishi, and then you go into maintenance mode where you maintain smaller amounts going forward. Like to recommend with the mushrooms particularly to think of them almost like dark leafy greens. You want to take dark leafy greens every single day. You can change if it is in a form of spinach. Is it sauteed? Is it blended? Is it juiced? Then you can switch to parsley. You can do cilantro, yada, yada, yada. But you're getting chlorophyll. So same way you want these complex polysaccharides, beta-D-glucans from functional mushrooms on a daily basis. But the mushroom can change. For skin, I like to recommend turmeric as one of the common because it is so accessible. There might be a couple that are even more effective, but generally available to everyone, and it's inexpensive. So be it in a form of curry or putting it in a turmeric latte, but it is one of the most medicinal foods you can eat. There's over 4,000 studies on its health benefits. And it is used for beauty in its original form, but obviously it also has anti-inflammatory benefits for sports, longevity, you name it, right? And to how quickly things work, this is a good example. So reishi has a lot of benefits you want to take for many months to feel them, around cholesterol and things like that. Maybe the stress benefits you feel faster. So if you take reishi for the first time, you're really stressed, you might notice it immediately helping with the endocrine system. But then if you use it for gut health and immunity, it might take a few weeks. So similarly with turmeric, people who take turmeric, especially if they take strong turmeric, might feel immediately somewhat energized of its effects. But if you want to use it for skin, you really want to use it for about 30 days because that's roughly how long it takes for skin to heal itself. So any skin routine should roughly last a month. So you shouldn't switch your skin routine every single day or every week. So I can take one for energy and sports performance. You can achieve energy and sports performance in many ways in your body through adrenals, for example. But one of the, I think, the most sustainable ways is through breath. I love doing breath work. It doesn't cost anything. It's free medicine in a way. But there is an adaptogen that is revered for it. It's called cordyceps. It has a really interesting birth story. It was found in the Himalayas by the Sherpas, so the people who you see guiding people to the top of Mount Everest, for example. And they have these large mammals called yaks that help carry things. And they noticed, the Sherpas a long time ago noticed the yaks grazing on these mushrooms, kind of insect looking like mushrooms, and immediately went to heat. So they were like horny yaks, and they were like, wow, what is going on here? And then they started consuming it themselves, instantly feeling a lot of vitality. So this mushroom has been a sacred mushroom for thousands of years. And what modern research has figured out is a couple things. One is maximum oxygen intake. So people who consume cordyceps have been able to increase their VO2 max up to 15%. So as high of an increase as 15% more oxygen in your lungs, helps you have more energy naturally without caffeine, for example. It also increases ATP production up to 50%. So that means your cells can produce energy more efficiently. So that's something that I recommend, not just pre-workout, but on a regimen to slowly improve your cardiovascular health and energy production.
Amazing, amazing. And then I guess one of the other ones would be for, what was the other one we're missing? Defense.
I can talk about brain a little bit, which is still in that
focus. Yeah.
perform
like
category. Yeah, I'll talk about lion's mane. You're drinking lion's mane. It seems like it's part of the podcast routine. The legend or the story with lion's mane. So in Japan, it's called Yamabushi Taki, which is named after these Zen hermit monks. They're the Yamabushi monks. And so while there isn't a direct writing to point to this, it's likely that these monks were using this mushroom to assist and support with their meditation practice. And today we look at lion's mane as our one functional mushroom and adaptogen that's also considered a nootropic. So for cognitive performance, brain health, that memory support. And this is really due to two compounds that have been identified in the lion's mane fruiting body, which are hiracenones and iracenes. And they have been able to activate. So really unique. They kind of two things are going on. They are able to cross the blood-brain barrier. So we have this barrier in our brain that is really important to keep out a lot of unwanted things that we don't want getting in the really sacred tissue of our brain. But there are a few things that can cross that barrier, usually negative things like caffeine and nicotine, heroin, opioids. But what's really unique is these compounds within the lion's mane also have the ability to cross that barrier. So they're light enough to cross. And then within the blood-brain barrier, they activate, it's called nerve growth factor or NGF. So I think of this like a light switch, like our body's ability to turn on neural firing and connectivity. So the benefits we see from that are this like increased focus and memory and all of these cognitive benefits. But it also has that ability, that NGF activity everywhere in the body. So nerve damage and joints. I used to use it with athletes that had irreversible nerve damage. So it's really, really amazing option for for focus, for cognitive support, and then many other benefits as well, right? It still has that immunomodulating activity, as I mentioned with the reishi. So also has benefits to our immune system health. There's new research coming out about lion's mane potentially supporting sleep. Because 70% of our immune system is located in our gut. There's also gut benefits. So as we're kind of being specific with talking about these mushrooms and adaptogens, I feel it's important to call out that by nature, they're non-specific. So we're really meeting kind of the Western mindset where we're at, but knowing that you might take something for one benefit, and don't be surprised if you notice 2 or 3 other parts of your health beginning to be improved.
Remarkable. And I know also one of the things in performance you talk about is some of these adaptogens also help with libido. And so I'm sure a lot of people out there would be interested in that. So in this book, there's so much wealth of knowledge about these 21 specific adaptogens that you're talking about in functional mushrooms. So I just want, like, no matter what, show notes, the book link will be there. I definitely highly recommend everybody owns this book because it's so informative. And in today's world, we have the ability to take care of our health, put our health in our own hands by informing ourselves. And this is really one gateway that we could really optimize our health. And so it's just, there's so much, there's so much goodness. And I know in one episode, we couldn't cover it all. So just like literally grab the book. But I just really want to honor your time because I think this is just so powerful and there's so much more to learn. I just highly recommend people, try these things and see how it helps you. I know, as you said, some of the things you'll immediately feel a difference. Like I do feel more focused, more clear when I consume the Four Sigmatic Focus Blend. I love the coffee I drink every day, which also has the functional mushrooms. And gosh, we have the protein powder. I've tried the turmeric blend. I've tried I've tried it all and it's all remarkable. And I noticed the immediate difference personally myself. So anyways, just to wrap up this episode in a bow, where can people best find you and learn more about this? Because there's so much vast knowledge that you both share.
So you can go to healingadaptogens.com if you want to learn more about the book and grab a book there. It's sold on pretty much all platforms that books are sold on: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Booktopia. You can also head to foursigmatic.com. We have a free online mushroom academy if you want to dive a little bit deeper into the fungi themselves. We are at Four Sigmatic on all social channels. And then you can find me personally at Danielle Ryan Broida, or Tero on Instagram at I am Tero.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. So if possible, in closure, I always ask my guests a question and I'm curious, whomever wants to answer this, or if you both want to give it a stab. So this is just an important question. Like if you were to leave one piece of wisdom, a life lesson that you've learned along in your journey, and you want to impart that wisdom onto us, what would that one piece of wisdom be?
Ladies first.
So the theme here, the wisdom is about connection. To me, fungi are the greatest teachers of connection. They connect all plants on earth. They connect life and death. They're the grand decomposers of the world, the end of life cycle and the beginning of the life cycle out in nature. And they remind us that we are supported and connected and part of it all. We're not alone. We've been using and relying upon these natural allies since we've been humans. I think a lot of times, especially in today's world, with mental health and everything going on, we feel alone and isolated. And through the mushrooms and the plant medicine, I find that we can really remember, it's not new, but remember how supported we are and how connected we are to all things.
Beautiful.
For me, it's more is not better. Better is better. And that's applicable to a lot of things in life. Don't work harder, work smarter. Including diet. More calories is not better. Better calories is better. Also, the spiritual and social connections we have. Having more friends is not necessarily better. Having better friends is better. So that's just a reminder on quality and that's something I like to remind myself, and often nature reminds myself as well of that.
Wow, beautiful. Both of you. That was a great way to close off the episode. My gosh, I thank you both, Danielle and Tero. What an honor. And like I said, I am an avid consumer of Four Sigmatic. Everybody get Four Sigmatic, especially, by the way, your sales are phenomenal. My goodness, your friends and family and like all the sales, Christmas time, your birthday, like all the time I get these emails of the sales. And I'm like, everybody get your Four Sigmatic. The discounts are remarkable. So everybody, of course, everything will be in the show notes. And I just thank you both for your time and thank you for your knowledge. You're helping all of us, be healthier, wiser, and better in the world today. So thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So welcome.